Elias Thorne had always felt the oppressive weight of the Thorne family's legacy. Not a legacy of grand estates or inherited wealth, but one of unspoken expectations, of musical perfection demanded, and rarely, if ever, achieved in the eyes of his father. The recitals in the stifling drawing room of their ancestral home, with its antique wood-grain furniture perpetually gathering a fine film of dust, were less performances and more public vivisections of his burgeoning talent. He remembered the phantom weights that would append themselves to his arms as he sat at the polished grand piano, weights that would miraculously vanish the moment he stepped onto the expansive stage of a true auditorium. There, under the warm glow of spotlights, the music flowed through him, untainted by the silent judgment of two pairs of eyes, now, at 46. With his father recently gone, the dread still crouched in his stomach. A familiar, unwelcome guest. He'd driven the familiar winding road to the family estate, the new CD of his latest recording playing softly. During the third movement, a subtle shift in cadence, almost imperceptible, had pricked at his ears. It wasn't deliberate. He'd made the recording in the studio, after hours, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a desperate need to capture the fleeting inspiration. He hadn't noticed it then. Too late now. Perhaps it was the CD player in his old car, a relic his father had always disapproved of, deeming it second-hand rubbish. A pang of familiar self-doubt, a well-worn scar on his soul, throbbed. His mother, Ilara, sat ramrod straight in her yellow armchair, an antique herself, still angled precisely towards his father's empty leather chair and the sun-dappled window beyond. Her pronouncements on his playing were etched into his memory. Your left took a wrong turn there, or that his playing was ponderous, confused, monotonous. Each critique was delivered with her eyes sliding surreptitiously towards his father, whose fingers would be steepled on his lap, elbows tucked into his narrowing torso, silently appraising, a silent co-conspirator in her judgments. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Afternoon, Mum." She looked tired, a fragile porcelain doll, though immaculately tidy. Her silver hair, once a formidable handful, was now gathered into a bun, barely the size of a walnut. "I expected you earlier," she said, her voice thin, a dry leaf rustling in the autumn wind. She waved a mottled arm towards a silver tray on the side table. The tea, a dark, rich black, trickled from the teapot into a delicate porcelain cup. Outside, an untended rose branch, wild and defiant, scratched gently at the open window. Elias pressed play on the portable CD player he'd brought, and his mother leaned back, her hands flexing rhythmically on the chair arms, almost as if conducting an invisible orchestra. They sat facing each other, two figures in a tableau of familial obligation, as the notes of his latest composition trapezed through a delicate dance of suspense and beauty. Her lips relaxed, a fleeting, almost imperceptible softening, the closest he would ever receive to a smile from her. The faulty passage approached. A tiny, almost insignificant flaw in the grand tapestry of his music, yet to him it was a gaping chasm. He considered a distraction, dropping his teacup, announcing a fake pregnancy. She'd always liked Sophie, his girlfriend, unlike his dad who had found her ungainly. But no, she would simply make him play it over, and here it was, worse even in this quiet concentration than he had thought possible. Her eyes, once closed in what he had hoped was a peaceful reverie, snapped open. Her fingers, which had been gently flexing, stiffened. He braced himself, a familiar knot tightening in his stomach. He would not mind. He would focus on what he had achieved, The small victories, the fleeting moments of praise any parent might be proud of. Her gaze, however, wasn't fixed on him. It drifted towards the empty leather chair where his father used to sit. A soft breeze, as if in empathy, played with the net curtain, dancing it gently to the piano's rhythm. "I think perhaps that's enough now, dear," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it in this room. He went to stop the recording, his fingers faltering, a tremor running through them, but his mother closed her eyes again, a sigh escaping her lips, and leaned back into the yellow armchair. The faintest of smiles, a ghost of a memory, touched her lips. Elias paused, his hand hovering over the stop button. He realized it wasn't him she was speaking to, not Elias, the son, the musician. She was speaking to the empty chair, to the echo of a presence that had once filled this room with its silent, yet thunderous, judgment. He watched her for a moment, truly watched her, perhaps for the first time in his life, seeing not just his mother, but a woman trapped in a silent conversation with her past. A strange, unsettling calm settled over him. For years he had performed for them, for their approval, for the elusive nod of satisfaction. He had practiced until his fingers bled, composed until his mind ached, all to fill the silence with music they would finally deem worthy. And in doing so, he had stifled his own voice, buried his own artistic instincts under layers of perceived expectations. He let his music play on. The final notes of the third movement faded, leaving a comfortable silence in its wake. Elias looked at his mother. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing slow and even. It was then, in that quiet moment, that something shifted within him. He saw the room not as a prison of disappointment, but as a stage for his own liberation. The dust on the antique wood grain wasn't a symbol of stagnation, but a testament to time, to the passage of moments, both joyful and painful. He quietly picked up the CD player and the CD. He wouldn't play it again, not for her, not for the echoes of his father. He would play it for himself. He would play for the joy of creation, for the pure, unadulterated passion that had driven him to sit at a piano since he was a child. "Mum," he said softly, a question lingering in his voice, not of obligation, but of genuine curiosity. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at him, truly at him, for the first time that afternoon. There was a faint glimmer in her eyes, something akin to recognition, or perhaps a fragile peace. "Elias," she murmured, her voice a little stronger now. "That last piece, it was beautiful." A gasp caught in his throat. Beautiful, not ponderous, not confused, and beautiful. "Thank you, Mum," he managed, his voice thick with unaccustomed emotion. She offered him a rare, genuine smile, a delicate unfolding of her features. "Your father, he always loved your music. You know, he just had a strange way of showing it." Elias stared at her, dumbfounded. All those years, all that silent judgment, the subtle criticisms, the endless pursuit of an unachievable perfection. Could it have been love? A twisted, unspoken affection, cloaked in criticism? "He would play your old tapes when you weren't here," she continued, her gaze once again drifting towards the empty chair. "Sometimes, late at night, he'd just sit there, listening. He never said anything, of course, but I saw him. He was proud." The words hung in the air, transforming the dank room into something lighter, something almost ethereal. The weights on his arms, once heavy, now felt like feathers, ready to take flight. The dread in his stomach had dissipated, replaced by a strange mix of sorrow and a burgeoning sense of peace. He stayed for a while longer, making tea for his mother, talking about inconsequential things, about Sophie, about his upcoming concerts. He spoke freely, without the self-consciousness that usually stifled his words in her presence. And she listened, truly listened, without interruption or critique. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias stood to leave. He kissed his mother's forehead again, this time with a profound sense of lightness. "I'll see you next week, Mum," he said. "Yes, dear," she replied, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "And bring your new CD, I'd like to hear it again. All of it." He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes. "I will." Driving away from the house, the CD player in his car remained silent. He didn't need to hear the music right now. He could hear it in his mind, clear and unblemished by past anxieties. The subtle shift in cadence in the third movement no longer felt like a flaw, but a unique signature, a moment of spontaneous creation. It was his. He thought of his father, not as a silent judge, but as a complex man, perhaps as burdened by his own unspoken emotions as Elias had been by his. The realization was a bitter pill, yet it also brought a strange kind of liberation. The pursuit of perfection, the crushing weight of expectation, it had been a cage. Yes, but perhaps it had also been a crucible, forging his talent, strengthening his resolve. The road ahead stretched out, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Elias felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The ghost of his father's judgment, the spectre of his mother's silent appraisal, had finally begun to recede. He was Elias Thorne, not just the son, but the musician, the creator, the artist. And his music, once a plea for validation, was now a celebration of his own voice, a resonant echo of his soul. He reached for his phone, a newfound excitement bubbling within him. He had an idea for a new composition, a melody that had been stirring in the depths of his mind. Inspired by the quiet strength of a yellow armchair, the resilience of an untended rose, and the profound, transformative power of unspoken love, it would be a piece that wasn't about perfection, but about authenticity. It would be a testament to the echoes of silence and the beautiful music that could finally emerge from it. And as he drove, the first few notes of that new melody began to form in his mind. A hopeful symphony, finally, truly, his own.
That's it, folks. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of English, please subscribe to English Tale Box for more captivating narratives and language insights. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves a good story or is learning English. Thank you for watching.